Welcome to all. Namaskar to all. And this is a third session of the GIST 2020 meeting organized on behalf of the GIST and IISF. And I want to thank all the organizers and from the Government of India, CSIR and various labs, and from the GIST, Dr. L.O.G. Rao, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, and all the other distinguished speakers and panelists. Myself, Arni Srinivasa Rao. I'm a professor in the Medical College of Georgia and also director for the Laboratory for Theory and Mathematical Modeling. And before joining here, basically I hail from the small city Vijayanagaram in Andhra Pradesh. And then long years I worked in Kolkata at the Indian Statistical Institute, and then I was at the University of Oxford and at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And then my area of research are artificial intelligence and mathematical modeling and probabilistic modeling. And this particular session is on the technology and tools for the employability and skills. It's a wonderful topic, wonderful area where GIST is contributing. And this particular area has a potential to create a lot of jobs at the rural and the urban aspects. And then also we have a panel of distinguished speakers. They have done wonderful research. They love the country Bharat, and they already presented in several forums various aspects of their own research, how they can transform the various technological and educational things in India. And we have also our co-chair, Professor Kannan, who himself is a pioneer in biotechnology in the country, and who has introduced the biotechnology syllabuses in the CBSE and various schools. And he was a former vice chancellor in the Nagaland University. And he has been picked by Dr. Abdul Kalam as the vice chancellor. And Professor Kannan has kindly agreed to be the co-chair, and we're really honored to have him in the panel here in this thing. And Dr. Professor Basu. He also, Professor Kannan will take over and he will introduce all the speakers about the individual speakers and then all the individual topics. Professor Kannan.
Yes, thank you, Professor Arni. It's a pleasure to be part of this group, and without wasting too much time, I think the panelists are Professor S. Basu, who has had an academic career from IISc Bangalore. Then he has been professor and head of chemical engineering at IIT Delhi, and now he is director of the CSIR lab IMMT, Institute of Mineral and Metal Technology. And his area of interest are in nanotechnology also. And thank you so much for joining us at such a short notice, Professor Basu. And now coming to Sanjay Benerjee, he has a he holds a special chair called the Cockrell Chair, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He is also Director of Microelectronics Research Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Okay, he is originally from Kolkata, and he has a BTech in Electronics from IIT Kharagpur and a PhD from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He worked with TI from 1983 to 87 before joining University of Texas. So his areas of expertise is semiconductor and nanotechnology.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Vijay Raghavan ji has joined.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll continue after that. Yeah.
Yeah. We welcome Dr. Vijay Raghavan, who is the Principal Scientific Advisor for the Government of India and the Prime Minister. And he's also Chairman for the Prime Minister Advisory Council. And myself, Arni Rao, I'm chairing the session. And we have a co-chair, Professor Kannan, Krishnamoorthy Kannan. And we both, and we all the speakers along with us, we welcome Dr. Vijay Raghavan. And we also want to personally thank him for all his efforts for COVID, advising the government and leading with other CSIR institutes, ICMR, taking the vaccines and other things forward, and then communicating with all the scientists. And it is a great honor for us to have him in this session. Dr. Vijay Raghavan.
Sir, you are
Thank
on
you
mute.
very, very much, Dr. Rao, Dr. Arni Rao. And I must say, first of all, that I'm very sorry I'm late. I had my fault entirely. I got timing wrong. I thought it was 9:30. Fortunately, I was reminded. My apologies. Let's get started. I would really love to hear from all of you in this situation about where we go in a post-COVID world in terms of research and in terms of our international collaborations and activities. I'd just like to say very briefly that our lives have been not only turned inside out, but the way our science is going to go is also being turned around. One of the extraordinary lessons from this pandemic is preparedness doesn't necessarily mean efficiency of response. We have seen extraordinarily well-prepared countries across the globe whose response has been very difficult for a variety of real reasons, no intrinsic fault of their machinery. And we have seen other contexts where countries which have been relatively thought to be underprepared who have managed well. So it is a major challenge going forward. If we take the disease as a metaphor for responding to challenges socially and economically, then it has really come to a situation where we must ask not only how much should we invest in science and technology, but also how well we must invest in science and technology, where must we invest. The other issue which has come up, which I'd like your views on, is for many, many decades before this pandemic, when you ask someone the value of science, they will say basic science is important because it builds the capacity and then it leads to applications and developments of technology which can be used in industry, and all this takes time. And unless you invest in basic science, you won't get the fruits of science and technology for people. But this has never provided a satisfactory answer. And I think the pandemic has provided that answer. It has never provided a satisfactory answer to the question, well, if basic science takes a long time to deliver goods in application, then we have around us rich countries all over the world who have invested in high-end basic science for decades, if not hundreds of years. Why not just buy the results of science and technology, build up our capacity, deal with our health and our education and our agriculture and training, and then invest in basic research? Now, the pandemic has shown how wrong this view is, because by investing in basic science and technology, India was extraordinarily prepared to reboot, reframe our structures, and respond in extraordinary ways when global supply chains were broken. And this has to be an ongoing link then between our science, our technology, and our application, and that is the biggest challenge. I will stop here and request other people to come in, the moderator to bring other views, and we can have a good discussion on that. Thank you.
Arni, your mic is mute.
Thanks a lot, Professor Vijay Raghavan, for giving a very wonderful opening remarks. And the preparedness, you are right, absolutely right, that the India's approach was very pragmatic, accepting, such a big pandemic like that, there will be some gaps anyway, but overall the response was very pragmatic. And we want to thank once again. And are you available for the question answers at the end of the session, or you want to have question answers now immediately?
How long will the session take?
It takes about 2 hours, 1 hour 50 minutes.
I don't want to disrupt the flow, but I'll be happy to answer a few questions now. I have another meeting, and then I'll try and come back towards the end if I'm able to, and listen to the conclusion. So
Sure.
if I'm not disrupting the whole structure now, and forgive me if I am, no problem, you can just tell me to go away. I'll be happy to do that. But if there are a few questions which I can answer now, I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, any panelists or anyone, any distinguished speakers or participants, feel free to ask a couple of questions. We have about 3 minutes there to have a next speaker.
Professor Raghavan, this is Sanjay Benerjee from the University of Texas. I think you've raised some very important points. You know, when I left India in 1979, India and China were kind of on par in terms of GDP per capita and many other metrics. The dollar to rupee conversion ratio was $4 or 4 rupees to $1. Now you've seen, you know, over the last 30 years where India stands vis-a-vis US, the West, and China haven't gone very well, of course, right? And going to your point about R&D funding, what I see, Indian R&D funding is about less than 1% of GDP. US, it's like 3%. In the West, it's also 3%. And China raised their GDP R&D funding to about 3%. And the results are showing up in terms of, you know, patents, peer-reviewed papers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the point that you made is right. It's absolutely right. And I think the Indian government ought to invest in basic R&D, even though the payoff timeframes are much longer.
Thank you, Sanjay, for that comment. Where are you at UT Austin?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let me do one thing. I think, you know, rather than take more questions, the point which Sanjay has addressed is a very important one. Let me just address that and then leave that as food for thought and go away. First of all, I mean, facts are facts, no question. You know, there are different rates of development and so on and so forth. The question is, what are we doing about that? So let me just summarize that and then leave it for you to discuss and think. Now, if you look at our science investment, it is absolutely true. It is about fluctuates between 0.6 to 0.8% of our GDP. But more worrisome about that, less than 30% of that is from industry. Whereas in other countries which have high investment of science funding compared to their percentage of GDP, industry invests typically about 70%. Now, why doesn't Indian industry invest in R&D? Indian industry has got capital, but Indian industry doesn't have risk capital because it has to compete now because of World Trade Agreements and other agreements globally. If it were to invest in research, it has to compete with the GEs, the Amazons, and the Facebooks of the world, each of which invests more than the entire US National Science Foundation, each of them every year in R&D. So Indian risk capital is not there. However, Indian institutions, for a variety of reasons, have extraordinary intellectual capacity, a lot of infrastructure in terms of equipment of the best kind, and a lot of space. So a partnership between Indian industry, global intellect, local intellect will mitigate this risk substantially. And that's a strategy we're doing. The second point is that today's, I mean, we might have missed many buses or whatever metaphors you want to use, but today, in many ways, from semiconductors to everything else, design is primary, manufacturing follows from design. And therefore, focusing on a design manufacturing combination, we can go ahead. I know Arni wants the next speaker to come, but I'll very briefly say that there are major missions now which have been rolled out: a cyber physical mission, an artificial intelligence mission, a quantum mission is coming the next few weeks, a deep ocean mission is just ready to go, and a new National Research Foundation will bring research that is going to be rolled out in the next few weeks again, will bring research to our ecosystem, where currently 9% of our funding go to institutions, central institutions, which have 10% of our students. 90% of our students go to state universities and colleges, which receive only 10% of our funding. That will change substantially with the National Research Foundation. So hopefully that and many flexible measures for industry investment will change that. So with that, I will leave you to your discussions, but I'm there if you could request one of the organizers to WhatsApp me an hour and a half from now if I'm done with some other meetings, I'll certainly be happy to join. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. Namaskar.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. This is LOG, and we will follow up with you appropriately. Arni ji, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Eloji. And Professor Kannan, now you can proceed with the speakers. I think our first speaker, Dr. Benerjee, and Professor Kannan will introduce him. I mean, I think
already I've introduced. Yeah. Now I'll introduce Dr. Archana Sharma. I think, she is one of our bright stars who's doing so well in high energy physics. She is a principal scientist at CERN, and she has been a lot in the news whenever, I've had opportunity to hear her on the television. I think she makes the Indian women very proud, and she has a DSc also from Geneva. She's a PhD from Delhi University, and kind of work she does in the CERN lab is, leading a whole team. And I know that she has been attracting a lot of young students from India to come and spend the summer, and I've seen her talking on the television. So we are very happy that Archana could join us today. Thank you so much, Archana. So we look forward to hearing your view. Then we have Sharad Mohan. So Sharad Mohan has this one. Yeah. Sharad Mohan is the CEO of a company called Nymblsoft, and he's a partner also with that company, and he's basically into IT world. That's what I could make out of it. So when he presents opportunities available, I look forward to hearing from Mr. Sharad. And then we have the next speaker, who is Ajit Jaokar. He is the course director of Cloud and Edge Implementation at the University of Oxford. Originally from Mumbai, he studied at SIS College and engineering from the Mumbai University. He's an expert on artificial engineering, edge, especially LOT, and then algorithms, cybersecurity. So he has a very interesting background, and I'm sure the future belongs to artificial intelligence. So we hope he will suggest for the youngsters what to do. Then coming to the next person, that is Abhay, Mr. Abhay Joshi, who is going to talk on educational challenges for the underprivileged, solution and success. So Abhay Joshi essentially has a just I think he's basically he is more into education field, especially for the underprivileged. So when we talk, we'll hear more about what he has to offer us. So I hand over the mic, and can I request Dr. Sanjay Banerjee, professor, to give his first talk?
Thank you, Dr. Kannan. I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. I want to discuss the shortages of skilled technicians, people like machinists, electricians, plumbers, and so on in India. What I'm going to do is I'll first share some educational statistics in India and across the world as a function of time. My time talking about the initiatives that I think India should be pursuing. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a real expert in the field of vocational training. And as Dr. Kannan mentioned, I've been a professor, but it's a professor of electrical engineering at a research university. So I won't pretend to be an expert on, training at the vocational level. Also, my knowledge of what's happening in India is also, really based on what I read online or in publications and anecdotal evidence when I visit India regularly. So forgive me if some of my comments come across as critical. It's not meant to be critical. It's help India, as all of us are anxious to do, I'm sure. So I got this from Prime Minister Modi's one of his slides from 2013, and I think he and the government recognize the problems India faces on many fronts, including the area of vocational training. So this shows the number of people who have skilled training in India. It's only about 2% of the total workforce. It's really pitifully small. And in fact, if you look at the absolute numbers, 5.5 million compared to 90 million in China, and this is 2013. So I think the numbers are probably even worse by now vis-a-vis China. If you look at the US statistics, twice as many technicians for, and that's 1/5 the size. So roughly 10-to-1 ratio of, trained technicians, which is very, very critical, both in terms of employability and in terms of improving the manufacturing capacity of India. So on the right-hand side, you see this pyramid that I also derived from one of the Indian government websites. And what it shows is, I think India does very well in terms of number of primary schools. But what I hear, and this is anecdotal, is that the quality of some of the schools, especially in rural areas, is mixed. Some are good, some are not so good. India also does very well as educational institutions, things like the IITs, IIMs, IISc, IIS, and so on and so forth. But as I was mentioning to Dr. Raghavan, I think we are in terms of the levels of R&D funding, and that's hurting India in terms of number of papers, number of patents, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the focus of my talk. What I want to talk about is this gap between high schools and four-year colleges and universities, what we call community colleges. These are two-year community colleges in the US, or the so-called vocational trade schools in countries like Germany. I think that's the gap that I'd like to address. So I'll go over the next 5 or 6 slides very, very quickly. What I did was I gleaned statistics from various websites, and just to give you a sense of where India stands with respect to the rest of the world and what the trend lines are. So at the very right, you see India, and these color charts are in orange, you show tertiary education. So this would be post-secondary, college, university education. It doesn't specifically talk about vocational training, but what I'm trying to point out is in terms of post-secondary education, India is lagging now behind even China, and certainly lagging behind the advanced OECD and so forth. So that's really the gap that's at issue, more so at the vocational training level, I think. The next few slides are also along the same lines. This shows years of school training that students in various countries have. So the darker the color green, the better it is, more training. India is worse off than certainly the West, getting worse compared to China. We are better off than sub-Saharan Africa, but of course, we have to do better than that. Along the same lines, this shows the share of population who have completed tertiary training at the college level. Once again, the lighter colors are worse, so India has a lot of catching up to do. The next couple of slides show where we are trend line. So India is shown in purple over here, and this shows the share of the population with no formal education whatsoever. So 2020, roughly 30% of Indians have no formal education ever. And that's comparable to poor countries such as Chad, Nepal, and so on and so forth, while the advanced countries obviously are much better off. The good thing, of course, is the trend lines show that the fraction of people without education is dropping, as it is in most countries. I only hope that we can have these slopes even steeper. Kind of along the same lines, this shows the projection of population 15 years and above who have been educated to the appropriate degree levels. So once again, you can see clearly that India lags behind the advanced countries. India, which when I left India in 1979, wasn't that well off. I mean, they've really advanced dramatically. South Korea, Singapore, and those are the so-called four Asian tigers. The good thing is the trend line is up. It's just a question of, how soon can you catch up with the rest of the world. This goes up to 2050. More statistics on these lines. I'm going through this very quickly because I want to spend time on what initiatives India can pursue. So this shows India statistics from 1970 in terms of the number of people with different levels of education. So the most important one for our purposes is post-secondary education, which of course lumps together four-year colleges, universities, and vocational training. I suspect that the fraction involved in vocational training is really, really low compared to some of the other countries. And that's something that I think we have to address. The right-hand side is really the same data shown as a percentage basis. So once again, the number with post-secondary education, although it's improving with time, I don't think it's improving fast enough. So this shows projections up to 2050. So I think India can and should do better. And this is my final statistics slide. So here I'm comparing population educational pyramids in three countries: China, October, goal in terms of surpassing in the near term. Korea, which started out as a poor country in the 1950s, in fact, they're worse off than India, but then over time, they've far outstripped India. And at the bottom, this shows the stats of India in 1970, all the way up to projections to 2030. And the way to read this is, and the educational attainments as a function of age groups. The green and the blue show the secondary and tertiary education. And as you can see, the number of people who have tertiary education, although it's improving for the younger groups compared to the older folks, which is the way it should be, it's not improving as fast as it has, for example, in China, or certainly as in Korea. So that's really our challenge, I think, over the next couple of decades. Okay, so the main question, of course, is, we see the statistics and it's things are improving, but not fast enough, and we're certainly falling behind many of our peers, such as I keep harping on China. So here are some bullet points that I derived from a study done by a think tank, NGO in the US. Once again, my direct knowledge of in India is limited, so many of these comments may be unfair criticisms. I don't know. I really look forward to the discussions during the panel session. So what the NGO in the US did a study, found the following. This is the number of dropouts at the secondary level in India apparently is very, very high. Vocational training is only offered in a very limited sense at the 10+1 and the 10+2 stage. So I think Indian schools, the high schools, really ought to, beef vocational training in terms of machine tool training, electricians, and so on and so forth. Now, I fully realize it's very, very expensive to do that. To set up a machine shop in high schools in a village probably is not a practical scenario. So I think what might be possible is for the schools to team up with the local colleges and universities, perhaps, and maybe access their machine shops or electrical labs, maybe during off hours, because to invest in things like machine shops, and it's extremely expensive. As Dr. Raghavan mentioned, I think Indian industry really hasn't met their challenge in many levels, and training I think is one of them. So I think if Indian industry could be encouraged to provide vocational training, I mean they do training for engineers, I know, as part of that cohort when I was at IIT, but I don't see Indian industry provide apprenticeships at a large number, for example. So perhaps they ought to be encouraged to do that. And the government might provide tax breaks to this industry so that they're financially incentivized to do that. Number of institutes providing vocational programs, very, very low. So they don't really have the equivalent of what we call community colleges. These are 2-year community college programs who provide associate degrees in the US. Germany apparently does a very nice job in terms of providing very extensive vocational training where they create skilled technicians. which really is helpful not only in terms of employability, but also beefing up the manufacturing base. Uh, Not just the low-scale manufacturing like making toys and garments, scale manufacturing of things like machine tools and so on and so forth. Acute shortfall of instructors. Of course, it's sort of a chicken and an egg situation. So here, perhaps in China, they have a ton of people who are involved in manufacturing, and I suspect we could hire many of them at modest wages to build up the training base in India. And once again, involve industry to make sure that we train the people in areas that there is demand. So right now there's a huge gap according to this study done by this U.S. NGO. Now it's not that the Indian government doesn't recognize this. So I got this bullet points from an Indian government, the National Skill Development Agency. So the Indian government, I think they also recognize some of these criticisms that I mentioned, and they say that to the extent that various challenges are recognized, the Indian government hasn't taken as many recognize the problem. The question, of course, is, what are they going to do about it? Vocation. So what should be done, and very interested in helping out with, is developing vocational training modules and standards in the curricula. And although it's not my area of expertise, if there's interest, I certainly would be willing to volunteer, trying to see what they do in countries like China and Germany and the US, and develop curricula and help the government set up these programs. The government apparently has set up some initiatives in this regard. Okay. So with that, I want to conclude. So I'm sure you've heard this joke that anytime people complain that, oh, education is very expensive, they should see how expensive lack of education is at all levels, primary education, secondary, and tertiary. And India is making progress. I mean, no question about that. But unfortunately, the trajectory of progress in India, when I left India, per capita GDP in China was actually slightly lower than in India. And now, of course, they're 3 times as higher. So clearly, India can do better. Emphasis perhaps could be shifted from non-STEM education. So I'm sure all of you know it's science, technology, engineering, and math education, to more of these vocational schools and trade schools. So, there's no point producing, millions of history majors and psychology majors and language majors if, they can't find jobs, right? Instead, if some of those resources could be devoted to some of these more practical fields, I think that will help with the employment sector and help Indian industry progress. So with that, I'll shut up. Thank you for your time.
So thank you, Professor Sanjay Banerjee, giving
Please
your
unshare your presentation.
Yeah, sorry.
So thank you. We thought we'll take all the questions after all the speakers speak. So now may I request Dr. Archana Sharma to talk, give her talk today on student exchange. Dr. Archana.
Thank you very much, Professor Kannan. Could I have a share screen, please? Because I still.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how do I stop share?
I have stopped your sharing, Professor Banerjee. Archana ji, you can actually share your screen now.
Okay, good, very good. And please tell me if you can see my screen after that, right?
Your voice.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. And you can see my screen as well?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So the topic that we discussed was really about the opportunities in mega science projects, particularly for students and budding scientists, and of course addressing nearly the crisis that was just discussed by Professor Banerjee just now, and also by Professor Vijay Raghavan. It was mentioned very starkly that we do need to skill up, so to speak. So what is mega science really doing? Mega science is seeking answers to very big questions, starting from the Big Bang and the atom, the very tiny atom, and going up to extragalactic scales. And this is the curiosity which has driven to a lot of scientists in India, where we have some extremely essential physicists and scientists who are part of this heritage that we carry with us, and we would like now to go and build a future heritage. That's really the matter that we are looking at. What is our future heritage? And of course, we have large number of challenges in order to get there, because we are looking at an age group which is very young at the moment. And we need to ensure that when they come of age, they are upskilled, they are plugged in the national programs, they are plugged in international projects, they are aligned with sustained development goals. And of course, we have employability, employment in a very sustained manner in our country. So that's the kind of challenge we face. So given my humble experience at CERN now for over 33 years, I have been looking at how Europe is doing it and somehow taking some lessons for our country. So here, of course, we are doing the science, we are asking questions about the universe, but we start projects which are very, very long in terms of timing, so to speak. In 1984, the Large Hadron Collider was approved and we got the first beams in 2010. Nobody knew the technologies that will be deployed in these decades, and yet we got there and we continue to innovate, building tools and techniques. And these technologies and scientific advances eventually contribute to the economy. I'm sure you know that in Europe, 1.45 trillion euros is the contribution of physics to the economy. So certainly we can maybe not go to that level, but at least we can have a visionary plan of how we can leverage and exploit our own participations in these kind of projects. So I will not go in the details of which projects and so on, because this is known to everybody. But needless to say that CERN hasn't stopped at what has happened in the past decade, which means that we have received a Nobel Prize to Professor Francois Engler and Professor Higgs. And of course, the good news is that everyone was a part of it. It was not just these two people, but there is a huge amount of collaboration that went behind producing that one plot that corroborated what these two gentlemen actually proposed in 1964. So just the nature of the science and the nature of the work tells us that planning and making a basis for a true roadmap towards a true global collaboration is the way to go. And it's not that our government is not thinking about it. They have been working concertedly at this. And as you see here, there is a very strong bilateral. Yes?
Dr. Archana, your presentation is not visible because
the presentation is visible, but it's not, you're not changing the slides.
Slides, yeah.
Now.
So now you can see. I'm sorry.
You're in the slide only on the PPT. Here, you just shift to the presentation mode.
I went to the presentation mode, and that's why it was not changing from what I understood from you. I just changed back, switched back to. I can try again, but we may. So let's just go like this, if you agree.
No problem. No problem. Yeah.
So yes, the strong bilateral cooperation for scientific research and education has been the focus. And I was so fortunate to also listen to Professor Anil Kakodkar just in the previous session. And here you can see him when he was at CERN and setting the direction of how we should be going in the future. And you see Professor Kalam, he came at CERN as well and encouraged all of us here. You see Dr. Shekhar Basu here, who signed the associate agreement with CERN. And of course, who doesn't know our Priya Pradhan Mantri Modi ji, who also came to Geneva to encourage our students. So yes, these are our people who have actually participated in that Nobel Prize that was given in 2013. And you know, perhaps Rohini Godbole, who is, she has received honors, a lot of honors in India, and also Professor Atul Gurti Burtu from the Tata Institute. But the good news is that we have several universities also engaged in this process. So why I mention universities? Because we have 700 universities in the country, and perhaps I have an old number and I did not look carefully at the statistics shown before. But these universities represent an immense potential, an immense intellectual potential, and we need to move from the incremental research that's going on, just pushing towards producing, a papers after papers, but then let's look at the citations and let's look at where we stand on the global scale. And that's where we need to examine ourselves. As I mentioned, that the mega science projects are really very long-term projects. Our governments are not that long, so to speak, but we need to be pragmatic and we need to engage at the forefront. And for that, we need this long view that if we engage with a make in India kind of approach, like Professor Raghavan said, design and build, not just copy and build, which was the Chinese model. I think because we have the intellectual potential and we have demonstrated intellectual potential in the various programs that our country has. So without going through the names here, because this would take another lecture, so to speak, but you can already see the various mega science projects where we are participating, and they are all at the cutting edge of science itself for researchers and technology for the engineers, for technicians, for school students to be doing their projects, because this happens in United States. It happens in Europe as well. These programs are well plugged in to the youngest kid that is interested to follow science and STEM subjects, so to speak. So we need collaboration, we need the contribution and the commitment to actually follow through and stand on the shoulders of the giants that have come before us already from India, who made the platform for us to take off. And needless to say that particle physics, where I work, is very closely linked with innovation, with engineering, with education, training, forecasting, and so on. So, I mean, there's lots and lots of things that can be done. Just to say that 70% of the graduates from physics, they end up in various industries. And that's where we need the engagement of our industries into our mega science projects in a very big way. And that's also something that we need to proactively work on. And there was an initiative last year, you may have heard about the Vigyan Samagam. That was an exhibition which went from city to city. And of course, it attracted a large number of students and so on. But that was an exhibition. And now let's move to the science, where we partner, we build, and we build towards leadership, essentially, in all these projects. And it's possible. The main point is that we have not, up to today, been able to be at the forefront of these international projects and of that scale, essentially. So yes, that's what we want to do. And there are many, many opportunities. I give you one example, that in this experiment where I work, called CMS, crystals have been used to detect particles in our experiments, but then applications have immediately been spun off, and positron emission tomography scanners have been built by GE in United States, and each one of these costs $250 to $600 $. And 1.5 million PET scans are performed per year in the US. It's a model that we should and must take on. Again, looking at the future, we should build facilities. If we compare to China, China has 5 projects of the kind of cancer treatment, for example, if I take this as an example. So making a very cost-effective cancer treatment in India, it's not going to be a bolt from the blue like the pandemic, but we know that it's there. There are 1.5 million cases of new cancer every year in India. So this is a zone where we should.
Time is up.
Just winding up. Yeah. So you see, there are many, many opportunities, and I think that I can just go to my this slide, let's say, where we can engage with the teachers for teacher training, with the students as well, as we mentioned earlier, for projects engineers and researchers as well. And definitely there is lots of scope, which I'm also working with my foundation, and many, many thousands of students and teachers are engaged. So I will just take one more minute, but before that, I want to mention that in the last year at the GIST, I met this young lady called Shweta, and together we launched a book. And this book is called Nobel Dreams of India. So I'm going to just play this, and it is only 1 minute, my last minute. Thank you very much. Is it playing?
No. You need to click play.
Let's try again.
You just
What sound?
Sorry?
The sound is coming, no moving.
Just a moment. Give me a moment. I don't know why. Is it working?
Archana ji, if the slide is in the presentation mode, then it will work.
Let me try. Okay, let's try. This should work. Okay, I just stopped it so that we can save few seconds. Thank you very much for your
Thank you,
attention.
Archana. Be around when we have the question session. Now, I would like to invite Sharad Mohan. He has a very interesting profile, which I must say. He specializes in defense, economics, politics, Sanatan Dharma, and motivational talk for young students. He's an American businessman in his new avatar, he says. And he has studied in IIT Kharagpur also. He studied in Dhanbad, Bangalore. So he has studied in many places. And he has done a lot of very interesting work. And he now lives in Tennessee in the USA with his wife and family. So his punchline is winners don't do different things. They do things differently. So Sharad Mohan, yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Kannan. Thank you, Yellowji. Thank you, Avni Rao, and Sushant Raiji. So for giving me this opportunity. GIST was very generous in having me mentioned as Dr. Sharad Mohan. I'm still not doctor yet. I'm more from industry. I bring 24 years of industry experience. So what I will be talking will be more relevant from the employability perspective, because I have hired and fired people from all the premier institutes of America and India. And I know what kind of things are needed from a certain aspect. I won't say I know everything, but the employability is something which Prime Minister Modi ji is trying to do a lot with the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So let me start. So that's my brief introduction, and I'll go to the slide number 2, please. And this is the brief introduction of myself. Been doing a lot of activism here. I have both the science and other background. Have written 3 books. If you see, those are available on the Amazon. A lot of topics have been covered, a lot of Atmanirbhar and how to make India strong, not only from the civilizational aspect, but from manufacturing, which I will be eventually talking in my slide. So we can move to the next slide. Good. So when Yellow G reached out to me for this topic, which is the employability and education, I had just launched my third book, which actually deals with the poorer region of India, the state of Bihar, where I had done some extensive research with two organizations. One is, if you have heard about Super 30, under the Mr. Anand, he actually coaches the IIT students. And in last 10 years, I think there's a movie also, and last 10 years, he has produced around 500 plus IITians, right? Every year, he has around 25 to 30 people. And then there is another gentleman, he's a retired secretary, Vijay Prakash. He has a Atal Bihari Vajpayee incubation lab where we do a lot of similar innovative way of teaching. So I'm involved with these two gentlemen and the organization. So education is something which has been dear to Indian, as we are the knowledge. We have been since very historical time. We have always focused on the knowledge. That's where we empower ourselves, unlike a lot of other countries. So we need to be educated, even if we are from a rich family or poor family, to get the social status. So education is very, very key to Indians. Now, the new education policy which came, and thanks to the ISRO chairman, ex-chairman, it looked very good to me when I saw it from the framework perspective. But since I have not seen the content, so I can't say on that. But one thing which this short presentation will be talking about the change evaluation process, which will enhance the education. Now, when I say about education, sometime back, the Infosys chairman, Mr. Krishnamoorthy, made that infamous statement that most of the engineers trained in India are not employable, and that was really I thought it was a little harsh without getting into the crux of the problem. But for me, anything for a country like India, anything which comes is good, because we don't have enough things to make a choice from. So I will be okay if somebody is trained half engineer or whatever. At least they are educated to some extent. So the problem which I see, or problem which I won't say problem, I'm more of a solutioning person. So the way the new education structure system, education policy is structured, I see the education tree the way it should have been. So I have, if you see the left hand side is a beautiful diagram, is a Madhubani painting. Split branches A and B. So what I have seen and what I think India should work on, and it's not that they are not doing it, but it may not be the way I am envisioning it. One should be the academic route, and another is the hunar-based, which is the skill-based route. And we have been talking, I think Dr. Sanjay Benerjee mentioned about skill-based and gave a lot of comparison of China. I'll come to that in my last slide. And so what I'm saying is, after class 8, there has to be a split academic route. So somebody who has to go to academic route doing his typical graduation, master's, PhD program to either get into academics, research, or industry, then that's one route. Another route is skill-based. Now, skill-based should be, again, till 8th you study the regular course, and then you get into the skill-based. Skill-based, I have a little different understanding from what I heard from Vijay ji, our principal advisor, which is skill can become obsolete. So what skill you should make investment, because India as a country always has a resource challenge. So what skill you need to empower your resource so that they can be used for a large period, and also once a certain skill becomes obsolete, how they can move to a next skill without much investment. So that is something which can only come from the industry expertise person, and more rather than more academic. Again, that's my view. So with due respect to others. Second thing which I see is the ecosystem. When I say education should change, we should do this and that, I don't see only putting the blame on the industry. Okay, so Tatas and Ambanis and the Birlas of the world are not investing enough, whereas China, there is a lot of investment, or US, all the private sectors are making investment. Yes, that is part of the problem. But I want to say that we need to, when we talk about education, there has to be the entire ecosystem that has to change, ecosystem. And that ecosystem to me is you need to also train your teachers, you need to train your manufacturing resource pool, you need to train your farmers, and animal husbandry resource pool. And yes, you need to train your politician, police, and administrator. And what kind of training? That's a different training, which I will talk later in my last slide. And these should not be just like one-time training. It should be continuous cycle. The last point in this slide is eventually what I have noticed. So the entire Bimaru states of India, the so-called Bimaru states, which constitute around 40 to 50 crores of the Indian population, which is 400 to 500 million people, almost more than entire America population. Now, in those places, what I have noticed is banks do not make enough investment in the manufacturing sector because of the NPA happening. So they keep on churning year after year low CD ratio, which is credit and deposit ratio, right? The amount of money which these poorer state people put in their bank is not utilized in that state. What I'm thinking is the banking system needs to be tied to the education, where government of India comes at the third party signatory, so that they take the fear of NPA and make a right investment as far as the Hunar based is concerned or the academic route is concerned, because eventually India can become strong and Atmanirbhar only when very huge population is educated. And this is where I have a lot of things mentioned in my book, which I cannot because of the time here, but this is just one point I wanted to touch. We can go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So another thing is the center of excellence. Now, education cannot be run, agree education is a state subject, or I think concurrent list, but education cannot be run in a silos. It has to have a center of excellence, which has a larger picture, a better planning across India, if India as a country has to be planned for Atmanirbhar Bharat. And this is where I came out on the left-hand side. Because of time, I cannot go through all of this explanation. It's in my book, but I have come out with this center of excellence model where I am talking about the split of the education in the two paths, the typical academic route, the skill-based route. If we want to have more and more Indians educated, why do they have to read after 8 entire subject, which academic route student has to read? They can have a very different subject. They can read more about their local temples, local historical things, so that school could be tied to the tourism thing, so the students can start working on the it's mandatory tourism. They can become a guide. So a lot of things, you need to know your local vanaspati, your local farms. So that kind of things can be built in this split, which I'm mentioning. Point 2 is mother tongue. So I think it's also mentioned in our new education policy, where till 5th grade, if possible, please teach the students in their own mother tongue, because the data says that most of these Nobel laureates, they started their basic education in their mother tongue across the world. So this will definitely help. This does not mean moving away for English. That's the discussion which people get into. This definitely does not mean that. There is no replacement of English as a global language, but till 5th grade, because this gives the child a platform to express, and expression and becoming an original thinker cannot come with an acquired language at that age. Okay, so moving on, I have also mentioned about 4-language policy proposed in my book, which a lot of my Tamil friends will love it. It's not enforcement of any language. So all these things I see as a part of the education ecosystem. Number 3, I was talking to one professor from Singapore. She just returned and she is now a bioscientist in Pune. She was mentioning about how the evaluation system in those countries is very different from what we have in India. And that's where my number 3 talks about the evaluation system should help in making students original thinkers rather than the bookish type. And how and why I have given detail in my book. I can take Q&A and answer that. From 9th grade onward, there has to be an ecosystem for writing research paper. Yes, from 9th grade onward, you need to write some kind of a paper. We used to write in school, we used to do different summer project or this project, that project, but that has to now go to a next level, and that should be part of the evaluation process, because you are building an ecosystem. You're making the student to write, even if it is something which is totally trivia, still that system has to be built. And the teachers and the school principal and the school admin, they should know how to file a patent. It could be domestically, maybe India can set up a department where any papers across the school, kids are encouraged to write the research paper and start filing patent. That's what China did in a mass scale. And this things cannot be a top-down approach. It has to come from bottom up and at the 9th grade level. Okay, moving on. We have been focusing enough on science and technology because we are good there. But I think the focus should be more on more on the mathematics, banking, because eventually it's the finance which decides everything across the geopolitics. Should be the new mantra for the students. So that idea has to be sold. This could be top down. That has to be sold. And this is where, when I said politician, administrator, their education and training, all these things should go there, because they need to know what they are implementing at that level and what is the big picture. Medical hubs, agro-based education system should be given top priorities. I know we heard that the U.A.E is spending some $20 billion for food corridor in Maharashtra, Gujarat, and all those areas. So those things could be tied here. Train the politician. And the last point, which is very important, is we have been hearing from our finance minister and even the prime minister about the artificial intelligence. This has been a fashion here. AI, what is AI going to do to India, a country which lacks so much of infrastructure problems, so much of disparity between the regions. So what I found was the poorer regions, and which I said 40 to 50% of the Indian population, they just cannot suddenly, like for example, say Eastern Uttar Pradesh or Orissa or Bihar, they suddenly cannot copy, say, Tamil Nadu and try to open multiple engineering colleges and try to match, because that's called the development model given by the Niti Aayog or somebody. What I think is they should play based on their strength. And artificial intelligence here comes into the picture. Artificial intelligence, API, application programming interface, everything needs maths. And if you see this region, technically, what I have noticed, again, I'm totally basing on my interaction with them, so I may be wrong. People, the students are much better in analytical subject like math than, say, a language like English or science, because science needs a very equipped teacher, equipped lab to understand. But math doesn't need a lab. Math does not need all those things. So artificial intelligence is nothing but a maths where a linear algebra can be broken to a 9th grade level, where the kids, instead of playing a tic-tac and adding up points, finding a pogo, they can start solving a smaller problem of a bigger final solution. For example, you have the gold price algorithm. Now that could be broken to a level where a 9th grader just solved one linear equation and he gets 2,000 rupees because he solved it, right? Everybody has a phone nowadays in India.
Dr. Mohan, you have time up.
Okay, I will just take one more minute. Can you go to my last slide? Just one, the last slide. If you can't, then I can let it go. But the last slide. Yes. So these are the books on which I have written. I'll just take 1 minute. How to make India replace China in manufacturing. I have put everything in here. One thing which I noticed is the disciplined workforce. Now, to become a manufacturing giant, you cannot just train somebody to make a screw or a nut bolt and they become you are replacing China with manufacturing situation. your entire workforce is not trained to work on a lathe machine or a manufacturing setup day in and day out, doing a very small piece of work without getting, without deviating. So this particular part 1 and 2, I have done some good research here. It needs a different kind of resource pool. It needs a different kind of resource pool. India just cannot replace China without understanding what the reason why Asian workforce is so different is because they are not netas. They do not ask questions. And point 1 and 2 is where I think we can work in detail to solve this problem and to make India a manufacturing giant. So with that, thank you very much. Sorry, I took a little extra time. So I'm done with my presentation. Thank you.
So now may I request Jaokar to get ready for his presentation, please.
I cannot share my screen yet. So if you can allow me to share my screen.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's working now. Very good. Thank you. So do you see my screen?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. So can I start now?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. So I will put myself in presentation mode first of all. So firstly, thank you for inviting me here. And my name is Ajit Jaokar. I am the course director of a course called Artificial Intelligence, Cloud and Edge Implementations at the University of Oxford. And I would like to state that my views are my own, not of the University of Oxford. So this is quite important here. So just namaste again, formally to everybody. Yeah. So I have a unique background and it sort of spans academia versus industry versus being also on the board of companies. So I have my own company. I'm a chief AI officer for a German company. I'm on the board of a cybersecurity company in New York. And of course, I teach at Oxford. And I think this is the future into many ways. And I think I will see this coming more and more into the world. It also allows me to give a very broad perspective into what the views are. This is what we teach at Oxford, and this is an industry course. And I think a couple of speakers before me talked about the value of industry. And I cannot stress that more for AI because this subject is so fast moving that you can't purely depend on academia. And you have, in fact, large companies like DeepMind, which came out of Oxford and then became acquired by Google. So there is a very close link between academia, research, and industry, specifically in AI and also in our case as well. We also take a very deep and a technical view of AI. So what we are talking about is our course is very engineering led, and it is designed to transition your career to AI. So it is not a master's course yet. It is more of a certificate course, but it has a long history of proving people who have transitioned their career to AI. And this is very important because I think that is the biggest need today in terms of the sort of the skills of the future. And more importantly, we work very closely with industry. So some of the names, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Intel, ARM, Verizon, MATLAB. And that is because we are a full stack course, meaning that we go everything from the cloud to the edge devices. And this makes us a very complex subject to teach. And I'm going to share you my experiences of teaching such a course. And unfortunately or fortunately, they are only exclusively in Oxford, meaning that they are non-India, but I think my views would also apply globally. So I hope that is the case. So this is from one of our students, and he has put it in the public profile. And what he says is that he took some ideas we were teaching about time series in our course, went back to his company, applied it, and they are actually making it work in a light bulb moment, as he says. I had a light bulb moment when I was traveling home from my course in Oxford, and he went ahead and started coding and applied. And this is what we like to see. This is what I mean by transitioning your career, doing something very special. And the World Economic Forum has said that we need a reskilling revolution. And why do we need it? This interesting book has a very interesting quote. It's a dystopian view, which says that the modern future textile mill employs only a man and a dog, the man to feed the dog and the dog to keep the man away from the machines. Yes. So this is the dystopian view. Yes, this means that just about everything could be potentially taken over by machines or AI. And somehow we, in the very near future, have to transition our thinking to this kind of world. Yes. And how are we going to do this? So my core point of my talk is that we need innovation in education, not only in the technology, but in the pedagogy. Yes, in how you teach. And these are some of the suggestions based on my teaching at Oxford, and I believe they are also applicable everywhere. The first one is that we address large-scale engineering problems for AI. I think this is very important because AI will become easier. Yes, because it's very easy to do a simple regression or a classification and so on and so forth. What you need is much more complex things which really go ahead and make a difference. We try to go towards that direction. I think India should as well. The second point is that we are building a methodology, and I'm very happy to say that I'm working with 2 institutes in India. I cannot name this, but we are working very closely with outside of my work. I'm taking some of my work and sort of sharing it with companies in India. We're trying to build a methodology to put AI into engineering problems, because this is a big need for the moment, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of focus on financial services, insurance, things like this. But I think that the future way of AI will be very much kind of enabling and transforming in industries. And this is what we are actually teaching in Oxford. And I'm sort of trying to build a methodology around that and taking it outwards and trialing it out very nicely into 2 universities in India. We will look beyond coding to maths and algorithms. The previous speaker, Dr. Mohan, mentioned about the value of maths, and I totally agree, because I think that people, that will make a huge difference. And I believe for the exact reasons what he mentioned. So I think this is very important as well. The next one is we work closely with the industry. This also I mentioned to you before, partly because in my opinion, I think many industries are going to be totally transformed. And by transformed, I mean that the value chain of the industry will change. This will maybe create far more interesting manufacturing jobs. And those jobs will not be the same as what manufacturing jobs are today. Yes, so you're not telling somebody to sort of tighten this screw, for example. Yes, so this will be a much more deeper thinker person. He or she will be in manufacturing, but their level of education, their level of motivation, their level of skill will be very high. The next one is work with harder and larger problems. I already talked to you about that. I said what we are doing is taking AI to edge devices, combining AI with IoT. And that is not an easy thing, meaning that you start to take AI into chips, you sort of start to talk to hardware and software and stuff like that. And the final sort of slide, to kind of summarize a few more ideas here, diversity is important. I believe I am personally very diverse in terms of both my sort of way of thinking, also being in Oxford and so on and so forth. I believe diversity is extremely important, and India is very good at that. I think complexity is important for the reasons I said. The rate of change in AI is very important. From my experience, I think the big thing which people miss is that AI has a cognitive dependency and a cognitive overload, meaning that there is a lot of things to learn in a very short time, and they depend on each other. And therefore, this is what I mean by the teaching. The level of teaching has to be far more important, and has to take into this idea that how are we going to train somebody to see where they are at and where they could go in a relatively short space of time, and then they are becoming independent. And the last point I would like to stress is I'm a kind of a bigger fan of countries like Canada, the UK, and the US when it comes to AI. And the reason for that is because these countries have done far better at hubs, have locations where a lot of talent has come together. Oxford's a classic example. Cambridge is a classic example. In Canada, the CFOR Institute is practically the leader in AI. And these are actually not very typically government funded. They're very different from the Singapore and the China model. I think perhaps we are getting too seduced by this sort of AI superpower idea. Yes, I think that we should look at our strengths. We should look at our industry strength. We should look at small areas, geographical areas in India which show potential, and sort of encourage them to have the 1,000 flowers bloom philosophy. And the last thing is, yes, this is my last slide. So to conclude, I believe that AI needs an innovation in education, much of which some of the things we are working on. AI is best suited for hard problems because it's going to be like everything is going to be AI very soon. So you're going to have to kind of distinguish yourself. And I personally see a lot of scope for AI in engineering, because I think that that is the huge area which will make a huge impact to jobs, future skills, and so on and so forth, and yet not being fully touched. And I'm very pleased to see that most of the previous speakers, Dr. Archana, and also had some of the similar ideas into sort of things Dr. Mohan I was talking about as well. So thank you very much. And that concludes my talk. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit Jaokar. Now, may I request Abhay Joshi to join? Now, Abhay Joshi is the founder director of Elephant Connect Education and has over 25 years of corporate management experience, including 8 years in training school and university students in science, maths, and engineering subjects. An accomplished educationist, Abhay's mentoring has transformed struggling students into confident achievers, performing to the best of their ability. And he is originally from Pune, and currently he is based from Milton Keynes, UK. So, Abhay Joshi, please.
Thank you, Professor Krishnamoorthy. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. So the interesting sessions that have been going on, I've been thinking about what I'm going to talk when I talk about education of underprivileged children. The reason I thought about it was because all the talks, absolutely relevant, absolutely important for India, have been at a very high end of spectrum to what I'm looking into. I'm looking into education of underprivileged students as one of our charities. And why it is important is because, as I will go through the slides, is because I feel that that is the foundation. Unless we have this strong foundation, achieving the bigger dreams can become challenging going ahead. So can you move on to the next slide, please? I'll try and stick to the time. So basically what I'm going to talk about is why, what, who, where, when, and how we can get the whole machinery running to make sure that the foundation is made stronger. Thank you. Next, please. Right. Does this picture bring your memories back? Some of you, all of you, or most of us have been through the schooling system in India. And I remember my school used to be looking something like this. Nothing about how the picture shows, but do we see our children going through such an education system that exists now? Probably majority of the educated class has now moved and have been sending their children to private education. But what about children coming from underprivileged background? They just can't afford to go beyond what they have. Now, the picture, as I said, is not something which tells the whole story. There is much beyond it. First thing, for the underprivileged students, what are the limitations? First one is a systemic barrier. Getting access to the education itself could be a problem. They may have to travel miles together to reach the school or even getting admission there. Once they get the admission, what about the facilities that are there in the school? Extremely limited in all respects, which will limit their growth in terms of acquiring knowledge, knowing about what is happening in the world, etc. Teaching quality, one of our previous speakers also touched upon that. I'm not saying it is very low everywhere, but yes, there are issues which need to be addressed there. Now, underprivileged students they have to just go through that whole channel. And the saddest part is the social barriers that they face on day-to-day basis based on where they live, in the environment, in the home. It's not conducive to learning. They hardly get time to even study. They may be sharing many resources within the house. So these are the challenges these children are facing. And that is where a lot of intervention is also needed to motivate them. Thank you. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Right. One of the previous speakers referred to some data, which is similar to this. Again, I have picked it up not from a very in-depth research. So this data, I've tried to show the sources from where it is being picked up. But when you look at the data overall, I mean, I was shocked when I saw this data, and this is very startling. Now, even if we discount some of this data that is being shown, still it doesn't paint a good picture. And when you now focus your attention to underprivileged students coming from underprivileged background, that gives a major impact. Now, something needs to be done definitely about this, and hence the intervention is needed. Thank you. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So the problem is colossal. I mean, it is huge, as you saw from the statistical figures and what we have been looking into. It's a huge problem. Currently, via Educational Foundation, run by my wife Manjari and I, we have been funding it since it started about 3 years back. So we have our own limitations in how much we can do. So what we do is we try and focus on something which we can address and get some results out of it. But the problem is colossal. Just us doing it is not going to help. Can we move on, please? Thank you. So this is the dream picture. Everyone wants to get into this. This is how it should not only look like, but you can imagine anyone studying in this environment gives a different sort of an impression and willingness, that motivation to study. I remember a few years back when my daughter, elder daughter, started her school in the UK. I had gone to drop her to the school, and for some reason I had to I had to enter the school right up to her classroom. And I was amazed with the infrastructure and everything, basic infrastructure. I'm not talking about a private school, I'm talking about a government school. And I thought, if I was given this opportunity to be part of this system, it would have made such a big difference for me. Now, even though I come from a reasonably middle class background from India, I then think about people who do not have that sort of a fortune, how they would be facing. But they have these dreams. Why not everyone get this dream? And that is where, again, we should try and focus to see if majority of the children coming from this background can be given this quality infrastructure and knowledge. Can we move on? One thing which I have seen is why I'm driven by this problem with children coming from such background is, whenever I go to schools, the schools that we support about 5 schools and the children from there. Whenever I go there and I just casually ask them, what are your dreams? And they come up with such fantastic ideas. I mean, and their eyes are sparkling with those ideas. And some of them definitely want to do management, science, and technology type of things. But they are looking forward to any support that they want, in spite of any background that they come. They have that thing, and there is so much of potential. We saw the numbers in the previous statistics. India has so much of that potential. Even if we get to work on certain percentage to push them up, it will help the nation so much. And that is where VI Foundation is working towards. Can we move on? Thank you. Right. So what do? We, as I said, we support about five schools. Recently, we also started supporting a foundation called as Shantivan in Bede. And the idea is, because, I mean, whatever it is with the new education system, the things will change. But as of now, if you look in the education system, 10th standard board exam is the key success point. That is the first step for you to do really more in your academics or any other career. So unless you do well there, you can't do much about in your life. So our target right now, at least, is to make sure that majority of the students get 90% or more. I know it is a dream, but we have achieved a bit of that. And that is the key thing. We take passionate teachers and we make sure that at least some percentage is achieved out of it. Can we move on? So that is a big difference, right? The whole difference between people who can really get all the facilities and the people who cannot get. And that is what we need to see. So what we do, as I said, we have a clear focus. There are students out of the many that we see that have burning desires to achieve something. And we focus on those students because with a slight push, we are 100% sure that they will be world-class students. They will really achieve a lot, and they will be able to give something back to India in the highest possible order. So what we do is we work with schools, and we have found amazing school management and principals who are also passionate to make this happen. Of course, these are government-aided schools that we mainly focus on, and we also make sure that we employ only teachers who are passionate to work. Only they can do this. It's not only about the knowledge of their subject, of course that is important, but the passion to make sure that the students can achieve their dream and make that happen is important. Yes, so this picture, sorry, can we go one slide back? The one behind, please, if possible. Okay, so that picture was actually talking about the success story we have achieved in last 3 years. This is the latest results. We had 174 students we supported in the last academic year in India. And of that, about 18% of them got 90% and above. So we were not expecting that, to be very frank, but our teachers worked very hard along with the school teachers and the principal, and jointly we made it happen. Of course, the efforts put in by the students, and that is what we want. We want to go beyond what is being done right now. Yep, we can move on. So a lot of intervention is needed. We have seen the gaps. Which are there. Particularly, the gaps amplify when we are looking at it from the perspective of children coming from underprivileged background. We need these children to get a huge access to many things, not only to technology, but to the data and other things. Now, everything was going on fine till March when this pandemic happened, and we literally came to a grinding halt. And we were really wondering what to do. The schools came to a stop. The schools were not happening. So we decided, we bought a couple of licenses, Zoom licenses, and then started teaching, continuing the education for these children on Zoom. Now, that has continued even during the vacation. Children wanted to continue to learn. So our teachers continued teaching, and it has been even going on now. So that was one of the technological interventions that we did instantly as soon as these happened. Later on, the schools started going on technology as well, which was good. But can we move on to the next slide, please? So these are some pictures where with so much of limited resources, this is a picture from Shantivan where one laptop is used for 15 to 20 children to see what our teachers are teaching. And that is very important because it's not easy for them to learn, but they are very focused. Sorry, move on to the next slide. Thank you. So what we do is we as I said, we have paid Zoom accounts, that is fine, but each lesson that is conducted online, we have a coordinator to mind the classroom, because teaching in the classroom is different experience from teaching through technology. We have to train our teachers to work and use the technology and make the lesson effective. You can't focus on each and every child. And my priority is always that the teacher has to look into the eyes of each and every child, which practically becomes difficult. So the coordinator does help in some form, because some of the children join the lessons from their home. That makes it a bit more tricky, but again, due to the school closures, that is the only way they have to do. But which also makes a bit tricky for for our teachers, which again, coordinator helps. We have a challenge there. Shared for the students who join from home, they just have shared one phone, or even sometimes no phone, so they cannot join. And that phone may or may not be available. I was talking to one of our principals very recently, because I saw that the number of students who were attending that was dwindling down recently. And she said that, what can I do about it? I'm trying to get them join the lessons. They want to join, but some of the parents have lost their job. They don't have money to even do for the basic survival. You can't expect them to charge their mobiles to get their children to work. So those are the challenges even now. Yeah, can we move on to the next one, please? So what do we need? What help do we need to take these for these dreams to take off? So we need technological infrastructure providers to help us to make sure that the cheapest possible technology is available to these students. So the last mile has to be carried forward. Then they will get access to the content. We need good content providers, world-class content providers. Of course, to run all this, money is always a thing. So money is always needed. And we need people who champion our cause to make sure that realize the importance of getting these people from the grassroots level, pushing them up, so that in future, in few years down the line, these students will become the leaders, technological or other leaders for India. And the final slide for me. So do help us to so that the dreams can take off. My contact details are there. I would be very happy to collaborate, speak with all the dignified dignitaries and speakers and panelists in this session or beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abhay Joshi. Now I just look at what are the questions. There is one question from Panduru Venugopal. How can we reduce number of dropouts from secondary education in India?
Professor Kannan,
yes,
we will have question answers after the panelist gives a summary of all the speakers.
Okay, fine.
You can introduce the panelist.
There is only one question, so.
Okay.
Anyway, I mean, I think now may I ask S. Basu to give his views of various presentations, and then we would like each of the panelists to give 1 minute what their view, how to take it forward.
Yeah,
good afternoon or good evening to all the panelist member and gift, and Professor Kannan and Dr. Arni for giving me this opportunity, and Professor Basu, Director of CSIR Institute of Minerals and Metals Technology at Bhubaneswar. I think we had a tremendous day today, all the sessions, but this session was very important. I think skilling India is what we work here, all of us, and so it's so much important for us. And we all know that how the skilling process goes on in India, and we know the word, the jugaad, that we all familiar with, and how actually it affected us over the time. Now it's time to really have jugaad can of course fix your tap in your home, especially in India somehow, but if you have to have a high-end product, it cannot be done by a jugaad process. So we really require a skill set, and that is what we were, a specific skill set, and that is what we were all describing or talking about, starting with Professor Banerjee. I think rightly set up the problem. He, of course, in various ways talked about that how deficient we are in this category vis-a-vis, let's say, Chinese or China that progressed last 30 to 40 years, and we were all together in 70s or late 70s. We're all together in terms of GDP and many aspects, and they have moved forward. So only 5.5 million people goes through vocational training compared to 90 million in China, even more, maybe the number. So that's important. That is what Professor Banerjee in different form highlighted it. And after that, Dr. Archana Sharma from CERN, of course, she dealt with a big project, of course, the big hadron, but then she emphasized that how to participate in mega project. It's important for India to participate. India did participate in the mega project and go on participating in mega project, and offshoot of a mega project like the PET scan that has come, and that's very important for nuclear medicine or for cancer treatment. So these are the fallout of when you are doing a mega project. Of course, there is a bigger objective. 40 countries are participating, a big budget, but from there, of course, the different offshoot of project can come. And of course, Indian students participated, and they learned a lot from there by participating. Indian scholars, students, and the faculty members. Mr. Sharad Mohan has a very nice understanding and experience about India, the state of Bihar, Orissa, Eastern UP. Mainly, he touched upon his experience from there, and this I did not be very regionalistic. I think it is true as well for all over India, whether it's the Tamil Nadu, northeastern states, or if you go to Jammu Kashmir or Gujarat or Rajasthan, it's all be similar in many ways. So he talked about that how we can deal, how we can do things right. You can have a route, academic route, but you can have a skill-based route to give jobs. The most important point that I like to highlight here, we know the problem, but we don't know the solution. The things are happening in very organic way. In India, things happens very organic way. It's not a very stringent, straight-jacketed, rule-based things happen. So far, if you see, many things happen very organic way. But if I just have a very good Hochschule, the German model here, a very good hands-on training or skilling school, but then I have to have a job for them. At the end of the day, there should be a job, there should be a market, there should be where they will be, I mean, the product that would come out those innovations have to be there. If that is not there, then just skilling will not work. And it's kind of a catch-22 situation. So these are important points given by Mr. Sharad Mohan, which I just added from my side. But I think he talked about different aspects, that using our mother tongue, leaving the knowledge and moving forward with a hands-on training, center of excellence and in education system, and research project, and things like business model, or giving the commerce or the importance of IPR, even the school level. Why don't the economics, the mathematics, everything goes side by side, even from the class 8, including the IP, the patent, right? The importance of that, how to write it and what you should write, and all these things at least will start from the school level, not in the graduate level. That's the important point he talked about. Dr. Ajit Jaokar is very pointed discussion on AI, and he's been, of course, director of this course in Oxford University. And he mentioned that how important is AI going to be, and what are the difficult problems or engineering problems that AI can solve and will be solving, and it's going to come in a big way. Can India positions itself today to jump in and do a big way in AI? We have the skill set. We are good in mathematics. The people are generally very good in mathematics, even if they're not trained, because it's a kind of understanding, a quantitative understanding, and the number churning is generally goes very well with the Indian student. So I think AI is one area, probably it required mathematics, data science. So here India can do really well. And he also mentioned different things like diversity. Diversity is very important for India, and we all agree that it's a diverse country, and we have unity in diversity. And diversity actually gives you many things, whether it comes from culture, language, the habit, the many things together actually give you the whole community, and the science is part of it. Science is not that you can get from different diversities, you can get a science out of that also. And then he talked about cognitive dependence. Of course, these are all AI where we can go forward in future. And then Canada model of CIFR, or US and UK model, he said, is much better than the model that Singapore or China is following as far as the AI is concerned. And the last speaker, Ajay Joshi, he of course was champion in BI Education Foundation. There's a foundation. He is been working with the underprivileged children to educate them, those who can afford, they would not go to school, or they cannot afford to go to the school. I think he is working with them and doing tremendous job. And he just mentioned and he just showed that how he is doing it. And of course, two important points he talked about: the burning desire for a student, even he is weak in terms of economy. I mean, he doesn't have money, but if he has the desire, he or she has the desire, or that you get a teacher who is passionate about teaching, and then of course you can overcome all these barriers that you have. And then through his foundation, he has done a wonderful job. I think that can be immaculate, or that could be we can copy that, and we can of course have such kind of foundation in many places in India. But this is not the one of the way to do things. I think there are diversified way that we have to take forward, that skilling India, whether it is done in IITs or ISR or NITs or CSIR, it is done in a very dedicated school for only skilling. Those are coming up that we know that, I know specifically that Tata Steel, Vedant, and JSW, and NALCO has come up a Biju Patnaik steel skilling center, steel in the sense for the steel industry. And so there it will be only a training will be given to the student after passing 12th for handling in the steel plant, whether it's a blast furnace or whatever training they required, or maybe a coking coal, or using non-coking coal to coking coal, or coal gasification. So these kind of training are going to come in Kalinganagar, close to Bhubaneswar. So such kind of, and that is coming from the industry. Tata Steel is actually taking it forward. So such kind of skilling university or skilling centers should come more. I mean, this is for the steel industry, but that can come from electronics, can come from leather. Of course, leather, there's a lot of diploma and training institutes are there already in India. India really does well in leather industry. I'm just telling. So these are the points that we discussed, and of course, the things were set by our principal advisor to Prime Minister, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. He mentioned that in the pandemic situation, what India did and how they did it, and they want to position themselves in a big way in the coming years. And government is looking at spending more in R&D in a different ways, and the participation, the key factor is the participation of industry in R&D. That's a key factor, and that's how we should move forward. Otherwise, I mean, we have to give you a priority whether we want to make roads or before we put 3% GDP in R&D. We want to make hospitals or we want to make primary education school, whether before we put 3% in of GDP in R&D. That's the question. I think it's a all over. I think the overall approach should be every sector we have to work, and we have to work in tandem. So that's in nutshell, and now maybe it is open for more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Basu. Now I request Professor Arni to take over the proceedings.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kannan, for fantastically introducing all the speakers. And each and every speaker spoke exactly the thing what is needed for the Bharat, a nutshell. And then they themselves are very inspired to serve the scientific community, society, and it is evident from their talks that how much they really connected to see that Bharat, the idea of Bharat being flourishing in the future. And they also appreciative of the idea currently, various aspects of the government, the good things, and then what all the improvements in the education system is needed. And finally, Professor Basu fantastically summarized, and he brought an important point about diversity. I completely agree that we have we are diverse country. That's the advantage. And here, being in the states, we have to all the faculty, not just me, all the communities, faculties, including the local, all the races, everyone have to annually go through a diversity course. That means how to give respect to other communities, how to interact with them in the coffee shops, how to interact with them in the office canteens. These all courses have been taught because the people are not accustomed for the diverse cultures. But back there, I see that naturally, as Professor Basu mentioned, we have that advantage of being a diverse culture, and diversity increases the opportunities to think better way. And also, as Dr. Mohan mentioned about the mother tongue, that's a very, very important point. Training in the mother tongue, my kids speak here 3 languages. As I speak 5 different languages other than English, other 5 different Indian languages. I grew up in various cities, so I would like to speak various languages whenever I get the opportunity. When I go to temples here, I speak their language if I know their language. So my kids also speak. I insist them at home. I don't speak at all English. If they speak, my kids are little kids, so I insist them. I said I don't know English, so they have to respond me in Indian language. So that point of that is well taken, and then Professor Banerjee's point of the vocational education, that's that's very well highlighted at the population pyramids he has shown, and the age structures. These all after the British left India, that's very we had a really tough time because all the economy is gone. All the money they've been looted, and our own resources have been sold outside, and the agricultural profits have been shared at the West. The cotton industry, everything, the money has been driven out of the country. Everything driven out of the country. So it is big. We have to have very, very solid approach to bring back. I mean, not we cannot bring back the money, but the technology, at least transfer the technologies, make our own kids happy and lively. So that point of Dr. Benerjee and Dr. Sharma, I know, very exciting. I really very passionate talk given by her. So, and same with Mr. Joshi about the vocational schools and AI, very pointed talk, as I mentioned, Dr. Basu. So these are all, uh, helpful for our own communities. And the questions, one of the questions that came up in that, I would like to read the question, Dr. Ben. I think we didn't had a, so Dr. Banerjee, someone asked Pandaru Venugopal, you're asking how can we reduce the number of dropouts from secondary education in India, Dr. Banerjee?
Right. So I think other panelists also mentioned this. What I hear and read, and this is anecdotal, is especially in villages, in the rural areas, a lot of the teachers don't even bother to show up, or when they show up, they don't teach and they just collect a paycheck, right? So I think if you have a carrot and stick approach where part of their salary might be tied to the graduation rates of the students at all levels, primary, secondary, or whatever. It could be either a penalty where they don't get part of the salary, or it could be structured as a bonus that depending on the percentage of students who graduate in the various grade levels in primary or secondary schools, they get additional bonuses. You have to have financial incentives, I think. Okay, so that might be a way of reducing school dropout rates. And similarly for the children, there could be bonuses. And as they graduate different levels, there could be small financial incentives. Problem with that, however, is, I've read reports where, students, poor students in rural areas, if they flunk exams, they're so traumatized that they commit suicide. So, I'm afraid that if you have financial ties with graduation rates for the students, if they don't graduate, the parents might get mad at them, child abuse and suicides and all that. I don't know. I mean, those are things to be looked at carefully. But certainly for the teachers, we shouldn't just pay them a salary just for being registered as a teacher. If they're not teaching and the students are not learning, either penalize them, or if the students, have acceptable academic outcomes, then, give them a bonus. Otherwise, it's simply not working in the villages. That's what I've read.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. And the question to Dr. Sharma is that to visit CERN, you have shown the photos. So to visit CERN, is there any scheme between the CSIR institutes and the CERN?
Perhaps I might want to just add just what was mentioned earlier by Professor Banerjee, because I think that there used to be a very strong system of polytechnics in our country. And I think we have to really focus on strengthening that system back. And typically a student would enter a polytechnic after finishing the secondary and not going to the higher secondary. And that's where dropouts can be contained. This is a system that works immensely in Switzerland. Not everybody is obliged to go through the higher secondary. And even a carpenter is a professional, a garagist is a professional, and he has his degrees from these kind of polytechnics, so to speak. I think that we do have a system in our country. Perhaps it's not working very well, but then let us look at consolidating all these structures that already exist. And I think that Mr. Abhay Joshi is trying to do that. So let's just put our hands together in the different, let's say, corners that we are trying to work, and have a concerted plan on what we want to deliver. Because the youth is completely confused. They have no ideas on where to go, what to do. So that is, sorry, I took that question here. But coming to visiting CERN, I think in today's world, you just go on the web that was invented at CERN, and you can do virtual visits whenever you want, from wherever you want. In the pandemic situation, there will be no visits for very long time. All visits were canceled this year and also in the next year. So I think virtual visits is the game for now. And in the future, of course, there will be visits organized by India, so to speak. I mean, there are many, many visits and student opportunities. And yes, It's not easy because India is an associate member at CERN, but the quota system is there, and we get only 1 or 2 students. I mean, look at India and think of 1 or 2 students. It really doesn't work. So we need to have all the institutions in India which are doing mega science projects have opportunities where students can go and do internships or engage in research or do a project and sort of virtually visit any mega science project that they want to engage with and are interested. So I think we should leverage opportunities in our country and somehow remove this kind of, let's say, impression that, in our country, we do not have this kind of stuff that we are doing here at CERN. We do have. And let's try to showcase that in a big way.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. And the next question, it's not specifically mentioned. So the mathematics part, Dr. Mohan mentioned and Dr. Jaokar both mentioned the importance of mathematics, and also Dr. Basu concluded there that we have naturally the skills of mathematics there, naturally that is there in our communities. I mean, our own blood and our thinking. So the question is, the AI, the education system, math. So do you think that India need to really more advanced? I mean, more designed mathematical learning, or we are happy whatever we have? Because traditionally Indian mathematics, that question, that's part of the question. Just to add to the question, India traditionally has thousands of year history of learning maths and learning various languages, various historical things. We saw recently Jupiter and Saturn that coming together, but then thousands of years back, we have much before Galileo came up, we have the history of understanding the planets. So the question is, do we still need to have some reinvention of mathematical training?
Can I take that? Can I take this question?
Either Dr. Mohan or Dr. Jaokar.
Okay, I'll take it first and then I'll briefly, yes. So thank you for the question. First of all, I think the math knowledge is very important. To specifically answer the question, I think somebody said before that there are really 4 or 5 things in maths you need for AI. Linear algebra, probability theory, some optimization, some statistics. And those are actually quite up to, in the UK, we call GCSE A-level 12 standard. Most people understand those concepts. I think the real difference is sort of to see or emphasize the teaching of maths even beyond, because most people don't take maths like you can do pure maths, for example, yes, and then you are a quant, yes, typically that's your job profession. Otherwise, you don't know where to go, yes. I think people need to be taught that there is a very good career path when you look at mathematics, and you can apply it maybe in AI, in algorithms, and so on and so forth. So it is not sort of just a purely abstract thing where you're learning math. So this is my sort of emphasis on that, to sort of take it from just being a pure subject to saying that it is something which could be a real career path for you in AI.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jaokar. Dr. Mohan, you want to add?
Yes, I agree with what was said. Maths, the current math in India is pretty good. Only thing is the applied part is missing. I think that's where the narrative should be built to understand. For example, we have all been reading recently that the Mount Everest height has changed from what it was given. But how many of us here know that who gave this Mount Everest height? It was an Indian student, a Bengali guy in Bhagalpur. At that time, it was Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, one state. This guy gave the trigonometry and the calculation for the height of the Mount Everest. And then it was taken by somebody in UK, and then because of the colonial thing. So there are many such, and yesterday was our great Srinivasa Ramanujan Day, right? Past day, 22nd of December, when we celebrated. How many of our students know about this, right? So applied part is missing. And very briefly, I'll say, when I was mentioning about the AI could be broken to a level where, you give a student a midday program, you give so many things, right? The model which I am proposing is, the kids, especially with the invent of the intrusion of the mobile phone. 100 million Indians have mobile phone. The kids play so many games. If we make that game tied to like incentivization, right? You solve one math problem, you get 2,000 rupees, 500 rupees at the lowest village level. You'll see the whole ecosystem change. That's where the pure maths, the academic maths will convert into the application part, and you will see the whole kids jumping into that, because the core of the Indian fabric is maths, because from the very childhood, people are calculating about their day-to-day mean. So we can talk more because of the time factor, but this is, yes, things need to be changed in that perspective.
But I just want to add
Sorry?
one point. Yeah. This year we have been celebrating Professor C.R. Rao, the great statistician, and statistics is also one of the strengths of the country. And I think Mahalanobis did it, then C.R. Rao. And, a man who could live till 100 and multivariate analysis, so many areas which he has contributed. I think statistics also should be made part of the school education, just not mathematics per se, but statistics makes it more interesting for children to, understand how predictions are made. I think we should encourage that also. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Kannan is right. I was there at Kolkata for 15 years at Indian Statistical Institute. He rightly mentioned Professor C.R. Rao and Professor Mahalanobis' name. And Professor Mahalanobis built the ISI from the money he received from first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. And then with that money, the planning money, he built the Indian Statistical Institute first building. Then he nurtured Professor Rao, and Professor Rao became the world famous statistician. And then this year he completed 100 years, and his 100th birth anniversary just we celebrated everywhere all over the world, and there are about 500 conferences held. And only within India itself, there are 200 conferences, all the departments celebrated, and all the continents, Australia, Africa, Europe, U.S.A. celebrated his centenary. And I myself wrote books along with Professor Rao. Professor Rao, and you can see the blue color books in my rack. They are written with him jointly. So that's a great honor, as mentioned. The statistics, the numbers, Akhada game, Akhadabaji is very much in India. So that, given that, the question to Mr. Joshi is that the schooling that you mentioned about so this plan, whatever you have a nice plan, and this is mixing with Dr. Anil Kovarkar, in the beginning he gave a talk of silage. So these all coming together. Can we have any plan? I mean, whatever you work with the close, do you face any hurdles when working in India, like you show laptops? So is that laptop through they are learning in English, or those kids learning through laptops in their mother tongue?
Yeah, thanks for the.
As Dr. Mohan mentioned, my kids and at home, they insist them to speak the mother tongue. It is 2 to 3 languages. But when they go out, automatically English, we don't have to learn. Automatically in the US, the kids learn. Even though I tell not to learn, they can learn. So, but I tell them to. Similarly, you have any? You want to show? Yes. You want to throw any light?
Dr. Adi, I just wanted to add with your question as well. When we all know that India has the Jilla Parishad school and some kind of the city-based municipal schools and the rural side Jilla Parishad schools. In that, we mostly find that the student doesn't have the liking to study, right? They get diverted to many other things, like nowadays smartphones with the YouTubes. Maybe a few of the students may get addicted with something, right? How all the panelists and of course Mohanji as well. So how do you see that to develop the interest within these students in our country?
Can I take this? Yeah, I would like to just address 2 or 3 points here. First of all, I fully agree with Dr. Jaokar and Dr. Sharma on in terms of the importance of mathematics. And because I teach here, I tutor students here. A couple of years back, I had a GCSE student. He asked me, he disliked maths. So he asked me, why should I learn maths? And he used to insist me whenever I used to take any new topic to tell me what is the importance of this topic. And then I realized that if I have to develop interest in any subject within the student's mind, unless the interest is developed, the student is not going to put himself or herself into that. The only way I can develop that interest is by giving them the relevance of not only the topic, but the subject to the everyday world. So even with maths, I think maths can be a very abstract subject, as well as it can be a it is a very practical subject as well. So teachers training, so school teachers training to make them understand that connection between pure maths and the applied maths, and how that can be communicated to the students, so that more students come out with better sort of understanding about maths, will really help. That is one thing, and that is what I do with my teachers in VI Foundation, not only for maths but even for science, making sure that to address Mr. Nandakumar's question, motivating them is very important. And yes, in Jilla Parishad schools or in government schools, children are least interested. I don't blame them. They are least interested because no effort has been put in to develop that interest. But if you start taking slowly things inserting some good things in their mind about the applications, and giving them day-to-day example about when you're walking from your house to the school, what do you see, how it is connected to your subject that you're learning here, etc., etc. They start thinking, and then the whole the sort of wheels start moving. So it's all about connecting to the real life, any subject we teach, and that will, I think, I believe in that it does make a difference. We, in my organization, I've seen that. And secondly, finally, coming back to Dr. Rao's question about the language, yes, the schools that I have dealt with, majority of the schools teach in local language, but some of them are in semi-English, they call it, where science and maths is taught in English. So what we do is, the normal communication happens in local language, because if too much communication happens in English, they lose the track. And once they lose the track, they are not able to understand the concepts. So normal communication is in the local language. But of course, scientific terms, mathematical terms, you cannot, I mean, at least I'm not capable of translating them into local language. But at the same time, we also train them to learn English, particularly from the communication perspective, because even simple thing, applying to a university, you need to know how to write. You need to know how to face an interview. And at that level, they are not even able to talk about themselves in their own language, forget about English. So we do subtly train them in using English as a language of communication, because whatever we say, English is going to stay as a global language, and we cannot deny that. So we do that. So yes, it's a mix of local language and English.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. In fact, that's what the new education policy in India is, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. That's a fantastic, that is what they know, the multiple languages, that is from, apart from other investments in science and in the industry, make in India, everything what the leadership, under the leadership of Modi ji, is coming up. One of the things also, their education policy, along with blending the English along with the regional languages, that's very important, as Mr. Joshi, that you are mentioning. And then the AI, because I work also in AI, the language, when you say the language part, the AI seem to be, the many scientists are agreeing now that if the computers are trained with ancient languages like Hindi or Sanskrit or Tamil, Telugu, the old language, Devanagari script, then the performance of computer for the AI would be much efficient. That's what the prediction. Because the sounding of the computer never gets confused if you train in Sanskrit than if you train in the Sanskrit or Hindi, then train with the English. Because certain sounds in English are situational dependent. But in Hindi word or Sanskrit word, whenever you write certain word, certain letter, that letter has always the same sounding. So that situation is not there in English. So the AI community also, whenever I go to the meetings, I see that, a lot of Western agreement that, the ancient languages, if you train to the computers, then the computer, their instruction, computer is like logical, mathematical instruction. If the instructions are given in a perfect language, computer never get confused. But English, sometimes, the pronunciation, certain vowels are different. So that ancient languages have a definitely bigger role. And if there are no more questions, I would like to hand out to, I want to thank once again all the speakers, the panelists, and then the co-chair, Professor Kannan, and the organizers, Dr. Rama Bansal, Dr. Mohit, Dr. Nandakumar, everyone at the IT, Mr. Srishti Jindal. I want to thank everyone. And then before that, the conclusion, I want to hand over to Dr. L.O.G. Rao, Dr. Eloji Rao, you're there?
Namaste once again. We had anticipated that this education, a subject that is dear to all of us, this session is going to overrun. I knew this. We slated few presentations so that we can engage in larger discussions. And I underestimated myself about how much time we could have given. But any case, thank you. But please consider two things. Since we cannot come to a formal closure here, I sincerely request you to share your thoughts in a proposal format. That is one. Second one is, at some point of time, a time that is convenient to globally suitable, we are going to schedule a webinar. And there we will invite all of you as panelists. And there probably you can come and share some of your thoughts. With those two thoughts, we will close today, but as you know, tomorrow we have three very important sessions. One is the health one, which is session 4. Then we have the interactive session. I think I have sent Google Forms to all of you. Take few minutes and put your inputs in terms of, because tomorrow, if you want to move forward, all of your challenges, observations, learnings, we need to compile and we need to share it. And the last is the valedictory, where we will have opportunity to hear from our dignitaries. So with those thoughts, I will say today, namaste, and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Nandakumarji, back to you for IT closure.
Namaste to all.
Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Arni and Dr. Eloji. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Dr. Kannan as well. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.